Welcome back to Previously Prohibited. I'm Jenin Eunice here with my co-host Melissa Whitty, and we have some exciting topics today. So I think we're going to start by talking about Trump banning the AP for refusing to refer to the Gulf of Mexico as the Gulf of America per his preference. And then we're going to talk about Saudi Arabia and its stance against Netanyahu's plans for the Palestinians in Gaza. But first, over to you, Mel.
Yes. So, first of all, if you could just hit that like button, hit the subscribe button. We certainly appreciate it. If you guys could give us a good review on Spotify, I think we got hit by some Zionists on there because we got like 3.6 or 3.5. I don't know. Maybe people just thought that we sucked. That could it could have been genuine reviews. Either way, if you do enjoy us on Spotify, if you wouldn't mind hitting a review, giving us a 5-star, we would really certainly appreciate that.
We'll even take a 4-star.
Yeah, even a 4-star. Yeah, if you could just like not hit 1, that would be awesome. And so, yeah, before we started, I know we did a show last week, I think it was, on this Candace Owens series that she is doing on Bridget Macron. Okay, I am 100% convinced now that Bridget Macron is a man. All right. And not only that, I 100% believe that this is some really deep, dark stuff that she has gotten into. So if you are religious, say a prayer for her because she is showing so much bravery right now. She is literally taking on the most powerful people in the world with zero fear whatsoever. And if you have not started her series, go to her YouTube page. She's got a whole playlist of it. It is called Becoming Bridget, and it is phenomenal. And what you're going to find when you start is that it does seem a little bit all over the place, right? But as you get into it, you'll understand why, right? You'll understand that she is setting the scene. And what really becomes apparent is that the associations of the Macrons, the people that they keep in their orbit at all times, these are incredibly shady, incredibly questionable people with questionable morals and very suspect backgrounds. And the more you dig, the more she digs, the more you realize nothing is as it seems with these people. And I thought it was so interesting. I finished up her latest episode today on this, is that one of the people in the comments, they said, this is starting really to remind me of Kamala Harris and Barack Obama, right? Which is, again, these are kind of starlets exactly like Emmanuel Macron that do seem to come out. Kamala Harris and Barack Obama, at least they actually do have somewhat of a legislative history. Again, Emmanuel Macron had never ran for office whatsoever before he became the president of France, right? He was appointed to be the French finance minister. He served in that position for 2 years, and then he runs for president, right?
Right. I can say too, I have to say, my initial reaction to this whole thing was like, I mean, okay, it would be kind of scandalous if it turns out that Bridget Macron is a man, but I don't really want to invest that much time in figuring out. I don't really care. Does it matter? And I realized how like naive of a view that is, because it's not just about whether this one person is transgender. It's about this whole, all the people who are complicit, all of the things that they're covering up, which is not just this one thing, all the things it takes to keep that a secret. And what also the fact that, for world leaders to be keeping this kind of secret exposes them to blackmail, means that they're really compromised in many ways. And there are questions too about who's really pulling the strings and that kind of thing. So it's a much bigger thing than like whether some random person is transgender or not when you think about it deeply.
Oh, yeah. I think, as far as the French are concerned, I think that they would happily have a transgender woman as their first lady. I think that they would have embraced that and they would have been totally fine with it. I genuinely do not think that the French care about that. So you have to wonder, okay, why was this hidden? Right.
Right.
And Candace starts to hint in this last episode. So right now where there are 5 episodes and there's an intro. So 6 total in the playlist. And she hints, and I know a lot of people are going to roll their eyes. I know a lot of people aren't going to like this, but I genuinely do believe it does come back to some kind of mind control. Manchurian candidate, MK Ultra candidate, something is going on here. right? Emmanuel Macron is not the man that he has been portrayed to be, and
Right.
he's actually kind of dumb. Not dumb. He's smarter than your average person, but he is not this savant, right?
Right.
He's not the genius that he has been made out to be, which is what was used to explain his meteoric rise into
Right.
power, right? That he's just this he's not clairvoyant. He has perfect pitch, I think is what it was that
Right.
they said. I actually have a nephew who has perfect pitch, so I know how special and rare that is. And but he was this all-star scholar. He had gone to all of these elite universities and whatnot. And then what you find when you start digging is actually all of the rules had to get bent to get him put into these universities. He's not any kind of savant with music or drama or anything like that, except for clearly he
Yeah.
is a good actor. But and then what do you know, it comes back to one of the most powerful families in the world, who we're not gonna mention that right now, even though we will.
Mhm.
And
Yeah,
Candace,
unfortunately, I'm behind on watching, so I'm still three
right, yeah.
episodes behind. So once I'm caught up, we'll have another we'll have another show about it. Hopefully, I can do it this weekend.
Yeah, yeah. So I,
Yeah.
I I know my sister called me this morning and she's like, "What did Candace say on the episode yesterday?" And she knows I'm obsessed, right? And I was like, "I haven't gotten to watch it yet. I was just busy yesterday, had a lot of stuff going on." And so she's like, "TikTok is losing its mind right now." Because my sister barely ever goes on Twitter, but she's always on TikTok. She's just all over. What the hell
uh,
happened? So I was like, "Okay, I have to go listen." And when I listened to it, I was like, "Okay, this is actually getting kind of dark. This is getting
yeah.
really crazy." So I think the next episode, I believe, she hasn't said quite yet, but the next episode that she features this story in, which will probably be Monday, she's going to have the author Xavier Poussard on
Hmm.
his on her show. She's going to air their interview where he apparently he has the proof. He has the
Wow.
actual physical proof. And
Wow.
so, yeah,
That'll be
yeah,
exciting.
it
So
will be. I know.
that is to come. And so the latest on the AP scandal. So Trump wants to name the Gulf of Mexico,
Oh,
or
he did.
he has renamed it the Gulf of America, which is obviously a contentious issue for obvious reasons. And he banned the AP from attending press conferences because they will not call it the Gulf of Mexico. Sorry, the
They
Gulf
won't
of
call it the Gulf.
America.
Yeah,
America.
yeah.
Yeah, this has some significant First Amendment implications, since the press is specifically mentioned in the First Amendment as like the freedom of the press is very important in this
Mhm.
country, and requiring the press to use certain words or names in order to
Mhm.
get access to the president, especially a really well-established press outlet like the AP.
Right.
I mean,
Right.
this analysis would be the same for any, but obviously in this case, it's making bigger headlines. Is, I would say, highly problematic. And I think another facet of things to talk about is that a lot of conservatives are happy and excited about this because they want to see the AP barred. And that bothers me a lot because I think it's very hypocritical. And if
Mhm.
we allow this to happen, then when the roles are reversed and you have a Democrat who's like, some news outlet won't use preferred pronouns or whatever, by the
Right.
same principle, the president could ban them from the press room. So it's a problem.
Yeah, I think it's interesting because I mean, we did see some of this crap with Obama, right? I don't think it was actually quite as bad with Biden, right? But I also think that the press, for the most part, was kind of put in check. The Biden press poll wasn't quite as open, I think, to these kind of alternative viewpoints or news sources, like the way Trump is trying to be. Um, Trump, I don't know if you know anything about this. He actually just won the right to go forward in his lawsuit against the Pulitzer Prize Committee. Do you know
Hmm.
anything? Did you see this?
I actually
So,
don't know about this. Yeah.
right. So Trump just won. I believe this is on Friday. So in 2018, the Pulitzer Prize Board awarded the New York Times and Washington Post a joint Pulitzer for their work in 2017 on the RussiaGate story, which
Hmm.
turned out to be a fabrication, right? In 2022, Trump, I guess, said, I think he sued them. to say basically like, look, this has been proven to be false, and I want you to put an addendum on their award, because
Yeah.
what they reported was false. It was a lie.
Right.
It has been proven to be a lie. And the Pulitzer Prize Committee came back and said, no, we're not going to do that. We're not going to put it. So he's suing them, right?
Okay.
So Trump has had this kind of contentious relationship with the press for a long time. And in his defense, they have been very unfair to him at times. A lot of times he deserves the criticism. If you follow me, you know I have a zero problem criticizing Trump when it's fair, right? But at the same time, the unbelievable amount of just total bullshit that has been made up about him, been said about him, been pushed about him, it does make him very hostile. And I know that as the president, you have to rise above and whatnot. So it's interesting because this seems like kind of a petty fight, but I genuinely believe that it's actually rooted in something much, much deeper between conflict between the two, right? And this administration is now saying, no, we are not actually we're not going to put up with any of your shit this time. You will say the words we tell you to say, or you will get them out, is what I think that they're doing. I'm not saying that that's right, but I do think that that's where this is coming from.
Right. Well, I think they're likely to get slapped with a lawsuit because it's a pretty,
definitely
easy,
come.
if they haven't already. I was like, but that could have happened in the last hour. But it's a pretty strong argument that you cannot bar the press for not saying things that
not just that but you can't also bring over past grudges from your old administration as well. Again, the AP is not the New York Times or the Washington Post. The AP didn't win a Pulitzer, and I'm not saying that that's what this is stemming from, but I'm saying that there's this general kind of animosity towards the press, and I think a lot of it actually is earned.
Absolutely.
Definitely.
I mean, I mean, I hate the mainstream media as much. I think they're probably the root of most of the evil in this country. I don't know. It's hard to say. It's like they feed off each other, but I think it's one of the biggest problems in this country is that the press has just become sort of an arm of the establishment. Most of it the establishment Democrats, and then some of it the establishment Republicans. So instead of serving as a check on government, which is supposed to be the point of the press, they're kind of serving the aims of exactly. And that's highly problematic, which is why people have turned to social media and why the government so desperately wants to control social media, I think, because it's where we can have these kinds of conversations.
Right. Yeah. And it's, we see it prop up all the time, and it's not just on the right. We see with Israel, we saw all of the lies that got pushed, post October 7th.
Hey, it took us 13 minutes to say Israel. I feel like that's a record.
It might be, but it kind of, that just reminded me. So we have I have a mutual on Twitter who is her name is Blakely. She's she's a lefty. I mean, she's like a far lefty. I like her. Okay. But she and I probably agree on absolutely nothing other than Israel and Palestine. Like nothing. And it's interesting because she just got demonetized on her YouTube. She has a pretty big following on her YouTube, and she posted a video which was basically saying, hey, good job, Israel. The U.S. Department of Defense just said that there are just as many Hamas fighters today as there were on October 7th. So everyone that you killed was simply replaced because you radicalized so many people, right?
Which anybody could have predicted. Everybody said that. That's what I mean, first of all, you only have to have a brain to know that. But even if you don't, we learned that from Iraq and Afghanistan, that obviously what happens is when you kill lots of people and lots of civilians are killed, you start to radicalize people against you.
Well, you can't kill an ideology, right?
Exactly.
It's just you just can't. It's an idea.
Unless they literally killed every Palestinian and probably every Lebanese and every Syrian, which I guess they wouldn't be afraid to do if they could. But
Well, I don't even think then. I think that you'd have to kill every Muslim, which is
Right.
just an impossible
Right.
task. It's just not going to happen. And
Yeah.
20 years it took us to learn that lesson.
Yeah.
And we tried it all, the carrot and the stick, and it just didn't matter, right? And again, these ideas are born out of oppression. They are born out of, and I'm not saying that they're all right, even,
No.
it's not that I agree with all of them. Somebody was saying the other day, like, you act like the Palestinians are totally innocent, and I'm like, it's not about whether or not they're quote unquote innocent. It's about not expecting people who have grown up under, have lived their entire lives under a brutal military occupation to act
Yeah.
innocently, right? We
Right.
shouldn't expect them to act. If
It's
they had been, if they had been, if they had been given equal opportunity and then they act out, that's different than
right.
being treated terribly their entire lives and then expecting them to just take it is what these people want,
Right,
right?
exactly. And it's not a hard, it's not hard to draw historical analogies and to see how obvious that these facts are. I mean, and I think we've talked about this before, but like there's the Nat Turner slave rebellion. Nat Turner led a group of slaves who killed a lot of white people, including innocent people. I believe
Right.
women and children too, in order to escape slavery. Did the women and white women and children and men who hadn't done anything, did they deserve to die? No, of course they didn't. It's horrible and that's awful. But you
Hmm.
can understand how somebody in extremely oppressive circumstances at some point becomes so frustrated that they're like, I'll do whatever it takes to get out of this situation.
Right.
And I think, Hamas also, in addition to being morally wrong, what Hamas did in terms of targeting civilians, it was also strategically a bad idea. But on the other hand, you can understand how people in these oppressive circumstances, and Israel also, they don't allow peaceful protests. Israel has done
Right.
everything in its power to try to stop the BDS, the Boycott, Divestment, and Sanctions movement, which was a peaceful attempt to get countries and governments and whatever to boycott Israeli products in order to bring about a change and get equal treatment for Palestinians through peaceful means. And Israel has done everything in its power to make that illegal. And in fact, and we've talked about this, a lot of states make you, if you are going to get state funds, including like as a victim of hurricanes or something, you have to sign a pledge saying you're not going to boycott Israel. So, I mean,
Yeah, yeah.
so
Well, it's not
at
just,
some point,
it's not just
yeah,
that. You look at the March of Great Return, which was a 2018 march. It was a peaceful protest within the Gaza Strip, and so what happened
yeah,
was these, just citizens of Gaza wanted to march up to the fence, right? And we've talked about this a little bit, and Jenin are actually going to have a big show, hopefully this Sunday on
hmm
this on October 7th. But so what these citizens did was they marched straight up to the fence, right? And what happened? Because they were trying to do peaceful protests and they wanted to enter what is what's called the no-go zone, which is an 18-yard buffer zone, essentially, which is between the regular part of Gaza and then the electric fence, one of three that are armed with robotic machine guns. And what happened was the snipers in the watchtowers just started shooting them, and
yeah,
they aimed for, in the boys, they aimed for the groin. We know that this was confessed to. This was investigated by multiple humanitarian, international humanitarian rights groups. 250 people, I believe. No. Don't quote me on that. It might have been
hmm
205 were killed. Hundreds of boys were shot in the groin, lost the ability to procreate, right? And then when they couldn't hit the groin, what did they do? They took out the kneecap. So you have literally hundreds of amputees from this single protest, and it ended up being like multiple days, right? And so I think it was like the entire month of May, and this was post when Trump moved the embassy to Jerusalem. And so again, this was a very peaceful protest. The most you can say is, oh, they were throwing rocks, right? But in Gaza, even that is just so pathetic because they're in watchtowers. These kids are not hitting them with their rocks and
yeah,
watchtowers, right? It is just cruel. It is cruel
absolutely,
shooting people, unarmed, helpless people who have nothing. They can't make a protest in any other way but then to throw rocks. Okay.
yeah,
And then you shoot them with live caliber bullets. Okay. There
And
is no
yeah, no, go
comparison.
ahead. No,
Yeah.
there's not. And then on top of it all, a lot of the peaceful leaders who've been quite good, Israel manages to throw in prison. Like, gosh, now his name is escaping me. Who's the guy? Barghouti? Is it? Am I thinking of
I
Marwan
can see his
Barghouti?
face. I can see his face.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. The name is escaping me, but they don't want. They also don't want a peaceful protest. They don't want. They've done everything in order to keep the Palestinians subjugated, in order to get that land, and to paint them
Right.
as
They want the
horrible
land.
animals. Yes, yeah, and
Yeah,
it's
it when it comes down to it, we can actually just cut all the shit out, right? It's
yeah,
not about it's not about peaceful coexistence.
no,
They want the land. God gave them the land. They want the
yeah,
land. Get the f out. Go somewhere else. That's what
yep,
it really comes down to. And
yep,
in fact, at this point, I actually um, enjoy when I not necessarily enjoy because I find these people completely abhorrent, but it is somewhat refreshing to just come across someone who they'll just say it. And
yep,
in some ways, some of them are just tired of it. They're like, no, we want this land, just get out. Okay.
yep,
And again, I actually kind of respect that to a certain extent because, like we've talked about before, unfortunately, whatever, whether you agree with it or not, morally right might makes right for the most part. I'm actually fine with that as long as the US isn't the might
yeah,
that you're using, right?
yeah,
As long as you are bringing your own weapons, your own diplomatic
mm,
power, your everything. You're not
yeah,
leeching off of us,
right,
right?
right,
Because
right,
we built this civilization
right.
and we didn't build it so that we could squander it 10,000 miles away on you and your religious or whatever, political, ethno state.
Right. And
So,
I mean, if they did have to deal with it without us, they wouldn't be able to. And that's the long and short of it. I
right,
mean,
right.
they
Which,
rely on us. So
right,
so,
which again, if you can't, again, might makes right. So if you can't
yeah.
actually make it, then that's
Yeah.
your problem. That shouldn't be my problem. That's why people always say, I know I come off callous sometimes when I said the only thing I want is for the US to totally disengage
Right.
100%, to hold them to the same standard that we hold every other
Yeah.
Western quote unquote democracy to. Okay. We don't give France money. All right. We might have some partnerships. We might have,
Mm,
some grants going back and
yeah.
forth and whatnot, but we don't. We don't give the UK money. All right. We might have some cooperation, but they have to stand on their own again.
Yeah.
And those aren't even good examples because, of course, the French and the UK have actually been really wonderful allies to us, and their men have actually died for the United States, whereas we cannot say that for Israel. So
Yeah. I
it's
mean,
it's a
I do think in a just world, at this point, we actually would, if you were, it wouldn't require just stopping aid to Israel. It would actually require compensating the Palestinians since we're at fault. I mean, we've enabled it.
yeah.
So but if we had never been, unequivocally supporting Israel and giving them all this aid, I would totally agree with you.
Yeah, I think I while I actually do agree in a just world, I also think, well, that's never going to happen. So,
Right. Right.
best case
Oh
scenario, we
yeah.
fall
We
to
just
the back, and we just disengage 100%,
Oh, I
right?
mean, and I would obviously be ecstatic if that happened because that would, and they couldn't keep doing what they're doing; they just couldn't. So they would have to suffer the repercussions of being a pariah in the international community, and that would not work for them. So they would have to do better.
Right. And unfortunately, so moving on into
Okay.
our next topic is we're
It
talking
all
about
connects well. So
it does all connect because talking about that, then you talk about um uh Trump's Gaza plan, right? And so
yeah,
something that happened in the last 48 hours is that out of nowhere. So I think we talked a little bit about Netanyahu making this. He tried to say it was a joke, but it wasn't a joke, right? It was,
yeah,
hey, why don't you just make a Palestine in Saudi Arabia since you have so much land that you're
yeah,
not using, right? To be clear, only about 10% of the Middle East is considered habitable.
yeah.
Yeah, Saudi Arabia on the map looks really big, but very few
Mm,
parts of it you can actually live in, right?
yeah,
And and so when he did that, the Saudis, and then combined that with Trump's comments and whatnot, the Saudis pissed, right? And so out of nowhere, what we saw, which we have not seen since October 7th, was the Saudis take this kind of public. They went on an all-out public front against Netanyahu specifically. And I'll read you guys some of the comments. So state media responded ferociously to what Netanyahu said. And it said, a report on state news channel pointedly described Netanyahu as a Zionist and the son of a Zionist who inherited extremism in his genes. It added, occupation does not have a good face or an ugly face. It only has one face, and it is Benjamin Netanyahu. The next one, the Saudi state-owned Al Arabia channel aired a talk show in which they questioned Netanyahu's mental health. And then a columnist for the Okaz Daily, which again, this is all state owned. If it's not state owned, it's definitely state controlled, in Saudi Arabia. So a columnist for Okaz Daily called the prime minister's comments silly and ridiculous, while a pro-government pundit on social media called Netanyahu the rotten one, which is a word play on his name in Arabic. And then like other Arab states, the kingdom has also been rattled by Trump's insistence that the Palestinians should be forced out of Gaza. So if I'm like, a Q believer and whatnot, and I'm thinking Trump plays 4D chess, I'm like, well, I'll be damned, out of nowhere, the Saudis grew some balls, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Because they banned pro-Palestine protests in the country. They crack down on anyone that gets quote unquote too extreme on social media. They have pretty much said nothing. They put out every now and then, they put out some statement and whatnot. And then out of nowhere, they go on almost like a blitzkrieg against Netanyahu and this plan specifically.
Which all raises the question again, is Trump a genius playing 4D chess, or a total idiot who just is a broken clock that happens to get it right twice a day at it?
Right. So what was interesting was people kept telling me, they kept saying, he's trying to get them to think of other ideas, right? He's trying to bring the Arab states together. And I kept saying, they have an idea, okay?
Yeah.
Okay, the idea is, but it's like, well, I don't know. I mean, I try not to, get too high on the copium and whatnot, but it's like, was he just trying to get them to finally freaking stand up and say no?
Yeah.
And then that would give him an excuse, because right now they've just been laying down and barely saying anything and putting out these kind of milk toast reactions and whatnot. But if they actually formed some kind of military alliance and said, if you try this, we're going to blow you out of the freaking water. We're going to shut down your oil. We're going to because again, these countries haven't even been willing to cut off the oil to Israel. And when I say that, all of my followers and whatnot in the region say, well, that's because the U.S. will retaliate. And I'm like, you think the U.S. is going to be able to bomb the whole freaking region?
Yeah. Also, you're going to bomb them because they don't sell you oil? That's crazy.
Right. Somebody's got to you got to stop being so freaking afraid. Okay.
Yeah.
Look at what the Palestinians have sacrificed. They've sacrificed everything. So I'm sorry. Yeah. If prices go up for everybody else, you know what's going to happen? It's going to turn everyone against the one country that's causing all the problems.
Yeah. Well, and it is turning. I mean, I sense it on social media. When I was looking at the replies to some of my posts, I'm like, these seem increasingly lame and desperate, and I don't even care anymore. I used to get all up in arms when I saw them, and I was like, that's just lame.
They're dumb and they're tired and and sometimes it's funny, all of my followers are like, I love it when you take the gloves off, and I have to pick and choose so I don't just come off like a raging bee all the time. But at the same time, it is kind of pathetic. And I've also seen kind of a shift in which people are like, instead of just like hardcore just coming at me to where they're like, okay, well, even like the most ardent Zionists are like, well, there's two sides to every story, as opposed to
Yeah.
before there was no two sides. It was
Right,
good
right.
versus evil,
Right, right. Or
And
it's just the
so
extremely aggressive, like, just kill them all. There are no innocent people, which I don't think appeals to anybody, like,
that
really
doesn't and
outside.
it's
Yeah.
pretty rare. Yeah. Yeah. So,
Yeah.
I think we were talking about censorship earlier, and I was talking about Blakely. She got censored for that video that we talked about, but another video that came up, and I posted it on my Twitter about this guy. He's like an IDF soldier, right? But he's clearly American. The accent
Yeah.
is very much
Yeah.
American. This guy just gave this interview like sometime in early February, sometime within the last 2 weeks, and he says that he was like a first, or he was one of the, he was went back to Israel in the early days after 10/7, and he starts crying, talking about these war crimes that were
Sorry.
done, and he starts saying that there was, again, he says the baby in the oven story, right?
Oh,
And
God.
it's like,
Did he see them just like Joe Biden? Or Joe Biden saw the beheaded babies?
no. So what's interesting is that when you listen to the clip very carefully, he says someone else told him about the video they watched. Okay, so
Oh,
he didn't see it.
yeah.
Some anonymous source, yet again. So right away we can tell, boom. Okay. Well, we already know that did not happen because we have the list of names. We know it didn't happen.
Yeah.
But there was this push a couple months ago, from the Zionist crowd to say, well, that all those stories were told in the fog of war, right? That there was a lot of outlandish stuff, but the state of Israel corrected itself right away, right?
No,
and
it
of
didn't.
course, no, it didn't. It didn't. It never quite corrected itself.
No.
There's still a video to this day up on Israeli state YouTube, okay, that you can go watch, that says that 40 infants, 40 babies were killed. That's a flat out lie. Okay. They have never once officially corrected themselves. And now flash forward, we're at 16 months now, going on 17 months, and we've got this guy who is some kind of IDF spokesman who travels the world trying to encourage people to support the IDF and support the state of Israel, saying, crying on this YouTube interview with a former Navy SEAL, about how he saw this stuff, and these guys like Andrew Tate and Dan Bilzerian are nothing but anti-Semites. And
I'm not gonna. I see.
Yeah, I'm not going to get into the Andrew Tate stuff. I just don't have strong opinions on the guy either way. I don't love him or hate him. I know a lot of people do. I just don't. I don't know. I think he's a little bit too young for me, even though I think he's older than me, but like he tries to appeal to a younger crowd, and I'm like, nothing about him appeals to me, and I don't agree with a lot of the stuff he says, but I don't like hate him either, Yeah.
I don't have strong opinions. I mean, I think those two probably do qualify as anti-Semites, but I
like Dan Bilzerian. I think he's interesting. I think Dan Bilzerian is significantly more interesting to me than Andrew Tate.
Sure, yeah, he actually says interesting things, but he veers too far for me into actual.
Does he? I don't even follow him that much.
I've watched a couple of his interviews. I was like, okay.
Oh, I don't think because he's always got his shirt off. I'm like, can we just like put a shirt?
Put the shirt on, yeah.
Put the shirt on. I used to know a girl that was one of his bikini girls.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I used to work with her a long time ago, and she's a real sweet girl, and I loved her. And I talked to her one time. She went out there wherever he lives, and she was like in the like G-string and whatnot, And she came home to visit, and I was talking to her, and I was like, "How was that? That's weird, huh?" She's like, "No, he's actually really nice." And I was like, "Didn't feel weird walking around naked, like practically?" She's like, "No, So. But yeah, it's weird to me when men don't have shirts on when they're giving interviews. So I
Yeah,
just kind of ignore people like
that's
that.
very weird. And I think his profile picture on Twitter is shirtless. But I agree. He
Yeah.
occasionally, I guess
What is that? Can we
anti-Semites
just
also.
Yeah, can we just put a shirt on?
Yeah.
Everybody.
Anyway, I know my husband would be very appreciative if we wrapped
Yes.
it up, because he's
Yes.
been dealing with my 1-year-old who has his favorite thing to do as of like a couple days ago is splash in toilets, and he shrieks
I know,
when
and
he's not
I'm
allowed in
trying to
the
convince I'm trying to convince them to send that baby to me. All right. Let him.
Splash in your toilet. But we will be back in a couple days, and I think we're gonna have a guest to talk about
Yes.
some of
the more interesting aspects that have not been explored about October 7th. So, yep. So,
great. Have a great weekend.
Bye, guys.
Bye.